Hi, how you doing? Gene from Mavestar Observatory. No more pranks, guys. I think we had enough yesterday. I had a bit of fun anyhow. You know, when you're dealing with these topics on a daily basis for year in, year out, like we have done, you know, it isn't the most light-hearted topic, is it? Studying these anomalies that are taking place in our lives are pretty serious, and you know, it gets a bit boring and a bit doom and gloom. So I think it's nice just to do, you know, and have a little bit of fun. But wow, did some people take it the wrong way yesterday? I think on the first video we had about 70 odd thumbs down, and on the second another 40. You know, people, you've got to, you know, lighten up a little bit. You know, if you're going to be so serious in life, it's not going to be enjoyable. And just because we're going for all these anomalies doesn't mean that we can't have a bit of fun as well. So, you know, you need to lighten up a little bit. Some of you guys that thumbed down that video is just shocking. Anyhow, we've got some good stuff in this video. We've got the CO2 meter. We're going to have a look at some levels of CO2. As you can see, right now in the living room, it's about 1,147 parts per million. I think that's just because I just breathed on it. It was hovering around about 750, but I did notice this morning when it arrived, the levels of CO2 in this living room, and there was only me and my partner here for the most of the night. We got in probably around about 5 o'clock yesterday evening, and we spent from that time till today in the house. So I dare say a bit of through our respiration or respiring, we released, you know, a reasonable amount of CO2 into the atmosphere as a byproduct of that. And you know, even still at 1,257 at the moment, that is still normal and standard CO2 levels for a living environment, and it's considered a healthy as well. When levels start to get around 5,000, that's when they can cause nausea. You know, it can even be life-threatening at some points over 5,000 parts per million. But I don't believe we'll ever see readings like that in any one of our homes. You might get slightly higher readings with more people sharing a smaller house. If there's a bigger house, then obviously there's more air in the house. It's probably better circulation, and as a result, you know, it's a balancing act. I'll switch on the oxygen meter, because despite there being, you know, an increase from the background CO2 levels, which I'll show you a bit later on outside, because one of the first things I wanted to do is see what the CO2 levels was outside, and I'll show you the results of that a little bit later on. I've already done that test, so I'll show you that. I'll just tell you now, it's 408 parts per million outside, and you'd expect that. Where we are, we're like in a village. We live in a cul-de-sac, and there's not much traffic that comes up and down our road. So, you know, you'd expect a cleaner environment than what you would perhaps in the city centre, Birmingham or even Coventry. But guys, we're going to do that. We're going to take the CO2 monitor out tomorrow. We're going to put it in the car, and we're also going to take a little train ride in the busy times so that we can get an idea, because there's something I want to show you guys. I already know the outcome of this. It's going to be high CO2 levels on the packed morning commute train from Coventry to Birmingham, but I want to show you just how high these levels are. And it's also an indication of how much germs we can spread, because most of the CO2 on board the carriage at the train will be us breathing on the train. And if you've been on a train from Coventry, one of the slower trains from Coventry to Birmingham in the morning, you know that most of the time you can't sit down because the seats are all taken, so it's quite packed. But CO2 levels can rise to 3,000 plus parts per million. I also want to put this in the car. Tomorrow I'll take my partner, maybe I'll do it tonight and show you the results tomorrow, because I've got to pick her up. So, you know, 2 people breathing in the car, I'll give you an average of what that will lead to with parts per million of CO2, and I'll do a fair test. What I'll do is I'll have one of the tests with the heater on, so there'll be some air circulation from outside into the car, but there'll still be CO2 levels in there. And I'll also turn the heater off so that the fan is no longer circulating the air in the car. So we'll see what the levels go up to on that. But the whole idea about this, guys, is to give you a clear idea of, we can live in an atmosphere up to 1,500 parts per million and have no side effects at all of that. And if, when I show you a bit later on, we put the CO2 meter outside in the atmosphere, taking a sample of the CO2 in the atmosphere, and if it's at 408 parts per million and it's at 1,500 parts per million in our homes, then going out into the environment is not going to be worse than stopping in your home. If 408 parts per million are a big problem for you, then you're going to have a real big problem living in a home and commuting on trains and commuting in cars and things like that. So, if every one of us had one of these, it's gone down to, by the way, now 942, and I think the reason for that is because I'm quite close to it and it's picking up probably some of my respiration as a result. But, the whole idea of having this CO2 is to show you guys the true facts about CO2. Now, I wanted to just show you as well quickly what I think is causing a lot of confusion, and that is carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. We all know what carbon monoxide is. It's a very poisonous gas which can be usually generated through unburnt fuel. When it's not burnt correctly, you'll get carbon monoxide as a result of it. If it's burning efficiently, you'll get CO2. So what's the difference between the two? Well, obviously it's in the name. Mono meaning one and di meaning two. And you can see that there is one carbon atom in carbon monoxide, and one carbon atom and one oxygen atom, and it's bonded by a triple bond. Whereas the carbon dioxide, CO2, has two oxygens in its chemical makeup, and you can see that it shares a double bond on either side, so there is 4 bonds and 2 double bonds on there, and that's what a ball and stick representation would look like. Actually, it would be in a V shape, not a straight one like this. So you'd have a double bond there and a double bond there. It'd be like a triangle almost. And for the fact it's got 3 molecules in its molecular makeup, it is therefore considered a greenhouse gas. And of course there's a lot of confusion between the two, and even people that talk about carbon dioxide get the carbon monoxide mixed up, or they don't know the difference between the two. But I just wanted to clear that up with you guys so that you know that at least. But one of them in smaller doses is a lot more fatal than the other one. As you can see from the readings that we've got, you can live in an environment which is double outside at the moment, or more than double than what is outside at the moment, and still live quite healthily. And that doesn't mean that the oxygen content drops, because even if the CO2 trace gas goes up in your living room or in your car or on the train, it doesn't mean that there still isn't 21%, as you can see, oxygen in the environment. There's a lot of things we can do with this, guys, not just taking it into the car and on a train and walking around a city over the next few days, which we will do, taking readings, but we can also take oxygen readings, and we can go out into a forest, and we should expect there to be probably less CO2 in the forest as a result of, first of all, being in atmospheric. It should be around 408 parts per million, and you would think in a forest, but then I don't know how this would stand in the winter time, because a lot of the forests around here are not evergreens. But I do know of actually one forest which we could take it into, where there's a selection of trees and they're like separated in plots of like 4 acres or more, and you walk for 10 minutes through one type of forest and then into another type where there's different trees. So it'd be interesting to take readings in both those environments to see if there is a difference. But I just wanted to share that with you. I'll put up next after this the test that I've done outside in the atmosphere, so you can see that it is 408 parts per million standard. But as you can see, guys, we have a lot more parts per million in our living environment, and as you can see, it's double at the moment, but it did go up to nearly 1,500 parts per million this morning when I first switched it on. So if everybody had one of these 10 or 15 years ago, we wouldn't be in the situation now where all the panic and the hype has been created by these politicians that don't even know the difference between, carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. And yet they talk and talk and talk and talk about it as though they're the experts. There is no crisis in our environment with regards to CO2. The plants need CO2. Plants start to shut down at around 150 to 200 parts per million. So, they're only just about thriving. In fact, if you want an environment where plants really, really thrive, you want an environment where there's 2,000 parts per million or even a bit more saturation in the atmosphere, and they'll thrive. But here's another thing as well, guys. If you look at places like the White Cliffs of Dover, you'll see that all that chalk in the cliffs was at one point little sea creatures. And the reason why it's so deep is because over millions of years, these little creatures, which are calcium carbine or something like that, I can't remember off the top of my head, but you can research it. Basically, they were the ones that were scrubbing our atmosphere millions and millions of years ago, clean of CO2, because there was at one point millions of years ago, I think about 500 million years ago, where the CO2 levels was at around about 6,000 to 7,000 parts per million. So it wouldn't have been an environment which we would have been suited to, but it certainly was an environment for them because they used the carbon in the atmosphere to build their little bodies and their bone structures out of calcium. And as a result, of millions of years of them scrubbing the CO2, they built up layers. And that's what we can see in these chalk beds now at White Cliffs of Dover and in many parts of the world. So, there you go, guys. If we do start to run into problems with high levels of CO2, I'm sure that the nature of this planet will come up with a way of cleaning it, just as in the similar way as what it did. In other words, these creatures that are still alive today in our oceans will just thrive more. The other thing is that when our oceans warm, they do release a bit more CO2 than normal. And as we're at a peak of temperature right now, you would expect more CO2 to be going into the atmosphere. But temperatures are starting to gradually decrease, and it is temperature that drives CO2 in our atmosphere and not the other way around. And as a result of that, we will, if we continue to see temperatures dropping and dropping on this planet, we will see eventually a drop in the CO2. But the point is here, and it's very sad, is that the governments around the world have taxed all of the population on this planet, and they've made trillions of pounds out of it. And it's nothing short of the biggest robbery on the taxpayer to date that has gone unchecked. And it's only through people like me that go out there and get the equipment put together and show you guys the actual truth, that give you unequivocal evidence, and you should have no doubt by now that the amounts of CO2 in our atmosphere are not dangerous and toxic, and that we've got a perfect content of oxygen. That's a massive reservoir. Let's just put that in perspective. If we only had 100,000 molecules, a million molecules in our living room right now of everything, 201,000 of those molecules would be oxygen. Now, when you consider we're looking at parts per million here, so if we had a million other molecules of air in this room, the only amount of CO2 we've got right now is 747. And this is why it's a trace gas, and this is why 408 parts per million is no big deal. So let's get on and show you the other part of this video. Now guys, just before you disappear and get on with your own little world in your own little lives, I just want to say something about yesterday. Again, we was having a bit of fun, and I'm surprised that a few people took it very serious, and to the point where they actually thought I was on drugs or I was abusing alcohol. And even though I made it blatant in the video that we was just having a bit of fun, it was dry sense of humour and nothing else, these people were offended by it. It makes me wonder how they cope in the real world when such a thing as this that little bit of fun we had yesterday is taken offensively. Can you believe we have people that actually find things like that offensive? They are in the mindset where it is very hard for them to sidetrack from anything else. And, you know, I really would prefer that these people find other places to go and, you know, not be even part of our community. If we cannot have a little bit of fun here and there and then get back to some serious science, then I think it's a very, very sad day. I just want to also mention something about what I put in the description yesterday with relationship to a joke. I put, at the Mavestar Observatory, we like drugs, we like alcohol, and we like sex. Well, you know, I've already explained, I don't take drugs and I don't abuse alcohol. I might drink socially here and there, and I think I'm entitled to, but it's not excessive. And, you know, I don't harm anyone when I do. I do, on the other hand, have sex, and you know what? None of you guys listening to me right now would be here if at some point your parents didn't participate, unless you was, obviously, a laboratory experiment. But I don't think that many of us are experiments. But, you know, I just want to add this last thing. You know, every time there has been global catastrophes, there has been a certain behaviour, and this behaviour has been recorded in one of the most published books ever, and you might have already guessed, it's the Bible. And every time there is a certain behaviour in multitudes of people, certain events have taken place. I could mention 2, Sodom and Gomorrah, and I could mention another one, the floods of Noah. And they were probably put in religious books, you know, these stories, as a reminder for a few people that when you notice, and it is quoted as it is in the Bible, that this behaviour again come about where people were wicked, people were corrupt, and, you know, I won't mention other behaviours that are commonly accepted now in this day and age, but when that was rife as well, certain events took place on this planet. And with relationship to what I put in the title yesterday, I think it stands exactly true. And again, I'll quote from the Bible, and you can put the quote in any Google search and you'll find that it is exactly part of the Bible. And it states that at those point in times of tribulation, people would rather believe a lie than the truth. Now, I think that's true to say with what people thought of me yesterday, having just put that in the description box about me liking drugs and alcohol and sex. But it isn't the case. It was all a bit of fun, and people need to lighten up. Guys, we'll get back to, obviously, serious science from this point on. And I also want to mention something else. You know, at this observatory, as I've said a few times already, we're in the red months of November, December and January, where a lot of our funding dries up. And, you know, you can see there's still expenditure always being made now, more than ever, you know, to set the record straight. You know, we can't do it without CO2 equipment. We can't do it without oxygen monitoring equipment. And if we're interested in following what is taking place and gradually increasing, such as muons in our atmosphere as a result of cosmic radiation inbound and colliding with upper atmospheric molecules, then we need the equipment and we need to get it out there in the field. Now, there isn't another YouTube channel that talks about CO2 like I do, and shows you the levels in your living room, shows you the levels of oxygen in the atmosphere, shows you the position of the magnetic North Pole and the magnetosphere strength of this planet, not just here, but in the United States, in Australia, in Hong Kong, and soon to be in Brazil, and also South Central Australia. I have kept every single promise I've made to you guys, and I will continue to do the research as long as I'm continued to be funded or supported. And that's why I ask you guys to help me over these next few months a little bit more than what perhaps you would do. You know, there's nearly 30,000 subscribers, and in a perfect world, if just all of you put 20 cents, yeah, we would have what we need every month without any problem. We'd have more than we need. But in this real world, not even 10 people during the course of the next 24 hours will put their hand in the pocket to help. It's as clear as that. That's what we have to put up with on a monthly basis, and it's frustrating because, you know, more people can help and more people can do more than others. I understand this, yeah, but you've got a rare thing here, guys. You know, you should cherish that. You know, you've got an observatory, you've got a qualified scientist that's prepared to go out and demonstrate these truths for you so that you know where you stand in the real world against the flood of lies and deceit and dishonesty. That's as simple as that. You know, if you want to support us, the links are in the description underneath the title of this video, and I'll say what I usually do. You take care, have a good evening, and as always, bye for now.